This is Gemara Avodah Zarah Daf Mem Beis, and we're holding on Mem Beis and Aleph. We're approximately 10 lines from the top, in which we're trying to figure out this case of the supposed nefel that might have been in a bar, and whether the koyin standing on top of it is going to be tamei, and there's different levels of sveikos that could be had. So said the Gemara. The case we thought was, just to reread from the top of the Amid, we thought the case was that there was a mitzvah echad v'rimain, a certain mitzvah and a presser and remind that did what? That put a stillborn into a pit. The kohen stood on top of it, and over to the Zach Nekeva. The Chacham came along and they were mitayr it. Why? Because we could say that a chulda and a bardalis were mitzuyin, and l'chayra they came and they ate out the stillborn and dragged it away. So the kasha was that on the fourth line, that what is the case? What's the vadai, and what is the safek? The vadai etila nefel. We know for sure that a nefel was placed into this pit, and then we have a safek if the animal dragged it away. Says the Gemara, so we have a vadai and we have a safek. Safek lo igaru, because he's safek motzim de vadai. Answer the Gemara, and this is really what we concluded with. Don't say the case is that we know that a nefel was placed into the bar, but rather what is the case? Something resembling, you saw a form being placed into the pit, so it's not even a vadai. Asks the Gemara again, we're 10 lines down, the first one line is labar. It said that why is the kohen leading over the pit? To know whether it's a male or a female. So we know that it was a fetus, a nefel thrown into this pit. Says Gemara, no. Was it actually a stillborn that was placed? Then Alida im zachar im nekeva. Teretz number 1. Teretz number 2. Since they're commonly found, then vadai garua. It's not a suffix and a vadai. It's a vadai and a vadai, and that's why the case would be different. As the Gemara, Rav Yechon comes along and asks multiple kashas against Reish Lakish. Esvei. Matzah tamnis yad tamnis regel. The case that we saw in the previous daf, a figure of a hand or a foot is found. You can't get benefit from them. And they why? Because similar to his hand and similar to this foot, the figures are worshipped Avodah Zarah. Asks the Gemara, why is it usher? Why don't we say that it's a shever of Avodah Zarah, which according to Reish Lakish should be mutter? Says the Gemara, that the case is where the figure of the hand and of the foot are standing on a pedestal, and therefore we could tell that it was a form of Avodah Zarah. Esvei another kasha, chavim mevatel avodas kachavim. A non-Jewish chavim can nullify his own idol shaloi v'shel chaveiroi, or of his friend guy. V'Yisrael inu mevatel avodas chavim shel akum. A yid cannot be mevatel the Avodah Zarah of a guy. Amai, asked the Gemara, why not? Why is this similar to Avodah Zarah that broke on his own? And according to Reish Lakish, such a case is mutter. So if a yid breaks in Avodah Zarah, it should be the same thing. Amar Abaye explains Abaye shepachsa. The Mishnah is a case where he dented, disfigured, but didn't completely destroy L'avodah Zarah. V'chipascha ma'yav. Evatanam. We learn to the Mishnah. Pascha will be shal chasra batla. Even though it's not lacking, says the Mishnah, it's batal. Explains the Gemara. Hani mi the pascha akum. Avol pascha Yisrael. Loi batla. It will not nullify it. V'Rava Amar second Daratolim ki pascha Yisrael nami batla. If a yid dents it, it's also batal. Ella. So what's the case? Kizera dilma migva law. The reason why it's aser, says Rava, is the gzera dirabanan that a yid cannot be mevatel Avodah Zarah. Why? Because we're worried that the yid will lift the idol and then nullify it. Of a akum be'ad Yisrael, and therefore it's a case of an idol in the possession of a yid. Chol akum be'ad Yisrael einai bitla li'olam. And for that concern, that is the reason Rabbanan said that if a yid is mevatel it, it's not going to work for the concern that the yid will pick it up and therefore will not work. Eisvei, a third kasha to Reish Lakish. Akam shevi avonim min amorkalis v'chayfa behem durachim v'tartiois. If a guy brings stones from Amorkalis, and what happens? So one of the Roman gods, v'pilu behem durachim v'tartiois, and roads and highways are paved over it. Mutaris, then the stones are mutar b'hana. V'yisrael shevi amin amorkalis, but if a yid brought it v'chim durachim v'tartiois asuris. Amai, why? Why is that any worse than a case of an azar that broke on his own, which is mutter according to Reish Lakish? Explains the Gemara, Chanami kide Rava. Here as well, we're talking about the case of Rava, that it's similar, just like Rava in the previous case, we're concerned that the yid will acquire it before breaking it, and therefore his act of breaking will not successfully nullify it. Eisvei, ask the Gemara, Rav Yechon, that's another kasha to Reish Lakish. About 20 lines at the bottom, the first line is Eisvei. Akum. Sheshipa. Akum letzarkai. If a guy shaves chips off an idol for his own usage, I apologize that the highlighting is paused. I'll get back in a minute. Here it is. He v'sheviyah mutarin. The idol and the chips are mutar. Letzarka. If you shave the tree for its own benefit, Hi asura v'shifya mutarin. It is asur, but the shavings are mutar. Continues the brisa. V'Yisrael sheshiba akum. If a yid comes along and shaves away an idol, bein l'sarka, he v'shivya are all asurin. So now articulates the Gemara. Amai, why is this true? Tavika akum shenisham eleha. Why is this not like a case of an Avodah Zarah that broke on his own, which according to Reish Lakish is mutter? Explains the Gemara. Chanami kiderava, as we keep on answering. Eisvei, another kasha. Rav Yosi Aimer soichek. Says Rav Yosi, one can grind his early ruach and scatter to the wind. So the Chum responded, what do you mean it becomes fertilizer? That's called getting a benefit. So ask the Gemara, and if we're allowed to get benefit from it, explains the Gemara. Chanami kiderava. Eisvei, another kasha. Rav Yosi ben Yosi Aimer Matzah Tzeirais Suras Derakoin. Someone found the figure of a Derakoin, of a form of dragon. It had his cut off. Safik Akum, Safik Yisrael Chatacha. You don't know, cut it off. Mutter, you're allowed to get benefit. Vadi Yisrael Chatacha. If you get for sure cut it, then it's going to be usher. Ask the Gemara, why is this true? Explains the Gemara. Chanami kiderava. Eisvei, continues the Gemara, and one last kasha. 4 lines to the bottom. Rav Yosi Aimer Avli Rakas V'Mosek Shamim Neishagvias Noishrois Aleim. Says Rav Yosi regarding what you let a plant under an Asherah tree. You're not allowed to plant vegetables even in the winter, because the foliage falls in it and acts as a fertilizer. Says the Gemara, why is this true? Let us be the case. But it is that breaks on his own. Explains that case is different. Why? Because the idol itself is mikuyam, and therefore, even though that which normally breaks off on its own is going to be mutter according to Reish Lakish, but if the main idol is still around, then it will not. And we turn over to Membeis and Membeis. Says the Gemara, V'ham shipuyan. But the case of the wood chips, te'ikar, but it's chamakayames, and yet, what do we see? Yasura v'shivyaha mutarim. So what do we see? We see you couldn't nullify it, and even though when the main part is still intact, it's still going to work. Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yeshua Amar lefi she'ein akum bala derech yedilasa. The reason is that a akum, the idol, does not become nullified as its normal natural growth. That is the reason why the trees of the Asherah will be aser. Says the Gemara, Eisvei Rav Shimon Lakish Rav Yechon. So the tables have turned. After numerous kashas of Rav Yechon, now Reish Lakish takes the stage. Kan shabroi shilon shel hektish, a nest that is on top of the tree of hektish, loy nahigan, v'loy nahanim v'loy moyel, b'shus shel Ashira. But if the nest is on top of a tree of Ashira, yazik bekana, you knock it down with a stick. Says the Gemara, we think the case is the bird broke off twigs from the Ashira tree. The kids and that's how he built the nest. And that's the reason Vikotani Yatis Bikana. You have to break it down with a stick. Why? Because you're not going to get benefit for something that was originally for Avodah Zarah. Explains the Gemara, my skin on the icy eitzim me alma, what is brought from elsewhere, Vikinsa Bahen, and a nest is built with them. And therefore, says the Gemara, that's why it's mutter behana, because it didn't actually come from the Asher tree. Take an ami, I'll bring you a raya. Take a tani, gavi a hektish, loy nanav loy ma'ilin. So yeah, Amr b'shlama daisi eitzim my alma. Hainu tani gavi a hektish, loy nanav loy ma'ilin. Loy nahiga, loy hanim midirabani, can't get a benefit midirabani, and loy ma'ilin midiraisa. Why? Don't like Kedusha, because there's no Kedusha. But it says the Gemara, the Amr Cheshavar eitzim imanav kitzim mayam, that it's talking about the case where the branches are broken off of the Asher and you were kind of them. Says the Gemara, why is it going to be no me'ilah? Hal kedishi, they are kadaish, and therefore should be regular me'ilah. So the fact that the twigs are not me'ilah must be that it came from elsewhere. Says the Gemara, what's your raya? Midi hayri halcha begidulan abal nachar mikan askinan. Talking about branches that come from elsewhere. Because what does yatis mean? Yatis freichen, you knock it down with the freichen, the chicks inside of it. Excuse me, one more time. Regarding the chicks, whether the nest is an active tree or an asher tree, it's mutter. Bebeitzim with the eggs, kan asurin. Amar Avashi ve'afreichen and the afreichen and the chicks. What's the halacha? Shvichon le'imam. They need their mother. Bebeitzin, kibeitzim damu. Excuse me, comparable to the eggs. And we continue with a new Mishnah. Ha'abaytzi kelim va'aleim sureis chama sureis levana. Someone finds a utensil, the figure of the sun of the moon, or betzulas darakun, or a dragon. You have to discard them. Says Gamliel, if it's engraved on something that's mechubad, dignified, it's aser. But if it's engraved on something that is mevuza, then mutar, and it will be pater. Says the Gemara, it sounds like from the case of the Mishnah that only the Shemesh, the Yereach, the sun, the moon, the Dracoin are that which they bow down and nothing else. But Veramini, Asheiche l'shem Yami, l'shem Naharais, l'shem Medabe, Midbar, l'shem Mechama, l'shem Levana. They shechted for the animals, the hills, the rivers, the deserts, the seas, the sun, the moon, the stars, the constellation, the Nimcham Mazalis, the Shum, Michael, Saragol, l'shem Shel Shel Katan. In all of these cases, because we see that they are indeed shechted for such a purpose. Amar Abaya miflach lakol demishtachri palchi. Says Abaya, when it comes to milfach worshiping, lakol mishtachri palchi, the Oivi Kachavim worship everything. Meitzar mafalchi, regarding to creating a picture and then worshiping it. Hani tlas, these three entities, the chashivi, they do. Tzairi luhu, they create such pictures. And they worship it, whereas the midachrini lenoi ba'alma of delay, but they don't actually make it as an avodah zarah. We're going to stop over here and we'll pick it up from here. B'siyata d'shmai.